I was born in Beaufort, South Carolina, at the U.S. Naval Hospital right outside of the gates of Parris Island, where my dad was stationed in the Marines. And that was in '49. And we were there for about 3 months, 4 months. Daddy was on active duty. We lived in Beaufort. And at that point, President Truman they changed the allotment system that they had for housing and for food. If you were an E3, a sergeant or below, you didn't get family allowance or allotments. They cut those out. But they offered the E3s and below an opportunity to go in the reserves if they didn't want to stay, particularly if they were married and couldn't deal without having the allotments. So that's what Dad did. And so he and my mother, who were both from New Orleans, moved back to New Orleans. And in 1954, in January of '54, we moved to Baton Rouge. And I was, I think I just turned 5 or 4. We lived in a little house downtown on Florida Boulevard, by where Gotchall's was, for about 6 months. So we moved after 5 years out in Red Oaks. We moved into Melrose, which is an older subdivision closer into town. And we lived there until I graduated from high school. Actually, even after that, until my parents got divorced in 1970. So that was from about 59 to 70. And that was the house basically that I grew up in. Dad was the 6th grade teacher and the football coach at Melrose Elementary. So he was my first coach. And I went 2 years to Melrose Elementary. Then my mother wanted me to go to Catholic school, so I went to Lady Mercy for 2 years. And at that time, Dad realized that the Catholic schools were about a half a year, a whole semester behind the public schools in what they were teaching. So I moved back over to Melrose, plus he was coaching, I was going to play ball for him, and I did. So I was 5th grade there and 6th grade there. Then I went to Baton Rouge High, Westdale and Baton Rouge High. And plus sports, I played football, basketball, and baseball from the time I was in the 3rd grade until, I gave up basketball after the 10th grade. I gave up baseball after the 11th grade. But, up until that point, it was, I had about 2 weeks in early August. That, I would sometimes go to my cousin's house in Lake Charles or something, but it was always something. And being the oldest of 5, I had a lot of responsibility. At one point, we were the 2nd story, and then because somebody was the basement wall, Barry Eggert had the basement wall, but then we were the 2nd story. So then, one day, we were getting tired of that name, and plus, we weren't that good, so that when people knew we were going to play, we felt like we needed a new name to surprise some folks, maybe. But anyway, so we were at Tom Campanella's house. He was our drummer over on Broussard and Longwood. And he had a water cooler, a regular cold water cooler, Halsey Taylor water cooler. We'll be the Halsey Taylor group. So that's what we were. When I got married, I was forced to get out of the band. That was the end of that. And I got a draft notice, and my mother went nuts. And she was crying. I said, look, I'm going to go take 9 hours of correspondence courses. I had like a 1.98 or something. And so I did that. I took 3 history courses, which was always my strength. And so I made A's in those and got my grade point up, so I didn't lose my student deferment, but my GPA was in the tank. So I went through, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I got out of astronomy and physics because the math was just, I didn't want to put in the effort, apparently. But so I was in astronomy, I was in history, political science, and economics were the 3 things I basically studied. And I got married in the middle of my junior year, in between semesters of my junior year. I was barely 20. And Nancy was 20. After I graduated, undergraduate, I went ahead and I took the year off. Nancy was teaching, so we were living off of her income that year. But after the first year, I decided I wanted to start a clerk. And so, as it turned out, Ralph was looking for a clerk. So I went to work for Ralph Brewer in 1973 as a law clerk. And he knew me, he knew my family. And we hit it off, and I fell in love with the law. But I got my degree and got sworn in and went to work for Ralph, so I knew where I was going to go. And I was with him our deal was that I was his associate, and then after 3 years, we'd work out a partnership if we were still together, and we were. But at that point, he just couldn't. He said, I'm sorry. He said, I don't think I'll ever have a partner. And he never did. He was the one who taught me how to practice law. He was the one who taught me sort of the important stuff about, the practice of law is not a sprint, it's a marathon. That you can take a lifetime to build up respect and lose it in a minute. And it's not whether you make a mistake that says what kind of lawyer you are, it's how you deal with the mistakes you do make, because you will. And they were great lessons. And he also got me involved in bar work in so many ways. Ralph set the course for my practice. Jimmy Abedy was with Roy Kiesel, Patterson, and Abedy, and Tommy Hudson had left, and Abedy left, and they were looking for another lawyer. And so that's when, and Mike and I had become real good friends by then, Mike Patterson. And so they came and said, you interested? And it was a young, growing firm, good book of business, and looked real interesting. So I did. And went on my own for about 4 years as a solo practitioner, which I had done before after Ralph. So, and I did that for about 4 years, and then Larry Bankston came and said, look, it was Carmish, Gray, and Hoffman at that point, and we need some more experienced lawyers. And I said, okay, well, I'm kind of ready to do something different. And so I went and worked with Larry, Carmish, Gray, and Hoffman, which became Hoffman, Sutterfield, Incinat, and Bankston. It went from being a Lake Charles, Baton Rouge, New Orleans firm to being a New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and then later Houston firm. So, but I was there for about 10 years. For me, bar work has been a real savior. Back in 1978, he called me out of the blue and says, you interested in being the chair of the insurance negligence section of the State Bar? I said, yeah, I think so. We'll set some work. I said, no, I think I'd be interested in that. And stayed active in that section for a bit. But from the House of Delegates, I went all through the 80s doing that. And then I guess in probably 84 maybe, is when I ran for the Baton Rouge Bar Board. And I was on the bar board and in the House together until I became, I think, president-elect of the Baton Rouge Bar, and I got out of the House to focus on that. But I served it was about 8-year, 9-year deal. So I got on the board, and it's a 3-year term. And I ran, and I won. I became treasurer. And then after that, I became president-elect. I didn't have any opposition, became president. Bar work gives an opportunity to really make a difference in the, quote, the rule of law, to protect and defend the rule of law. And that's been my, been a real focus of mine during my course of my bar work. And that's what makes me kind of keep coming back. That's why I still enjoy being a lawyer. I mean, I think I'm the only one to have served on the Board of Governors of the Trial Lawyers Association, the Plaintiffs Bar, the Board of Directors of the LADC, the Defense Bar, and the Louisiana State Bar Association. We had never really owned up to our civil rights past and the lack of, or the discrimination that actually took place, particularly against African American lawyers who were not allowed in the bar until, I think they were allowed before I got in, but it was not, I don't think, probably 1970 was about when it was. I think maybe a little earlier than that, but not much. And but it was hard. They, a lot of the black lawyers said, well, hell with them. We don't need them. We've got the Barnett Society. And they did. And, but, we wanted to reach out. It was wrong. We needed to do something about it. It's funny. I mean, the Junior League, of all things, had an African-American president before the Baton Rouge Bar did. And you wonder. I mean, we're supposed to be upholding the law and civil rights and all that, and we were sluggards. But I do remember we did a couple things. I actually went to the Martin Society with Ed Walters, who was my president-elect, and said, look, we were wrong, and we admit it, and we're sorry, and we're here to apologize. And we're here to beg you to come and join. We need you. We want you, we need you, and we think we can do great things together. And as part of that, we started the joint meeting of the Martin Society and the bar in Black History Month, February of every year, which I think still goes on. We actually got Fast Case as a resource for every member of the Louisiana State Bar Association that they get as part of their dues. So back in the old days, before I was sworn in, you used to get free from the Secretary of State a set of statutory books, every lawyer. Nowadays, you got to pay for it. Some people can't afford it. But this way, at least, you have an equaling of opportunity of resources. And so I would think that, that was a big one. That was a big one. And one of the others was that Wayne Lee and I were at the convention ABA convention in San Francisco. And I'll never forget this. We're walking back, and Wayne was the first African-American president of the State Bar. We're walking back, and at that time we had a section on diversity. We paid dues to be in a section. And nobody else had that. And Wayne said, Mike, we're the only state bar that requires people to pay money to promote diversity. And boy, it hit me. I said, you're right, what are we gonna do? He said, well, I'm thinking about, I'm gonna form an ad hoc committee. I said, form a standing committee. He said, no, I'm gonna take it a step at a time. Wayne's a very cautious guy. I'm not. I told him, I said, okay, you make your ad hoc committee, but next year I'm gonna make a standing committee. And so it has been. And I think out of that we've grown, we've had diversity outreach and all sorts of things in the State Bar, a lot better than we did back then. So that's another thing I think I could be proud of. So Nancy and I were married in 1970. Rawls came along in 74. Slater came along in 77. We ended up getting divorced in 81 or 82. Then in 1991, Leah and I married. Yeah, Leah died in 2006, and the boys were 9 and 7, and so that was tough. I got remarried briefly in 2008. Didn't work out, but then Kim and I have been married since 2013, and basically she's their mom now. Early on, I was involved with Kiwanis. I was president of Edgewater Kiwanis back in like 79, 80, something like that. It's back in my up and coming years, and then I also, in the mid-90s, a lot of my service work was through the bar, but in the mid-90s I also got involved with the Boys and Girls Club and have been involved with them ever since. Been president, been past president, board chairman, capital campaign chair, all that kind of stuff. And that was a major focus. So, and then also in between, there are various different times I've been on the vestry at church, and I go to Trinity Episcopal, and I'm getting ready to roll off my second term on the vestry. I did what I could. Still willing to do more, but it is time for others to take, and they have taken over that lead, because we got a lot of work to do.